Okay, today we're going to go over the Hiperfire EDT Trigger. I'm going to first install it into this jig so you guys can see that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of it and compare it to some other triggers that I have here in jigs, which I have quite a few of them. So we're also going to test the pull weight using a trigger pull weight gauge. Now, the first thing I'd like to point out is you open it up. You've got obviously all the parts here. Now, they also sent you a sticker and instruction manual and all that good stuff. One of the things that's immediately apparent when you open it up is the trigger and disconnector is already kind of assembled, and they put this placeholder pin in so that when you go to install it, you can kind of just drop this portion in and then follow this through to make a really easy install, which I like. I think it's just a little bit of a convenience there. They give you this handy dandy punch for doing just that, so you can follow it through and get everything installed. And they give you two hammer springs. We're going to use the green spring, which is advertised as a 4.5 pound pull, and then they also provide a 5.5 pound pull red spring here, so just a little more spring tension on this one. First thing you want to do is drop in this trigger assembly. Okay, so we'll drop that in right here. Okay, once we get that in there, we'll go ahead and put our safety in. Okay, now I've already got my safety spring and detent in there. There we go. We'll get this installed right here. All right, so that's in there, and then we'll go ahead and snug up this grip here. Now, one of the things about having this disconnector assembly already done with the trigger and everything is it just saves a little bit of time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually take and install the trigger pin. So we will just kind of line it up like so. We will take the punch. First step is going to be, basically installing the punch as a placeholder. So we can drive that right on through using this. There we go. Don't even need to use a hammer for that portion. Okay, so now we've got that placeholder in there. This pin fell out, and so now we'll take our actual trigger pin and just drive that in there. Okay. I'm going to take it over the edge so that it doesn't drive through I don't have to. There we go. So, trigger portion's installed. Okay. Now, installing the hammer is always a fun part. So what we're going to do here is I'll show you. This is the correct orientation for the hammer. Okay, hammer spring. It is fairly common for folks to install it backwards, where it's essentially flipped. And what that does is it'll actually a lot of times function okay, but you'll have trigger pins walking out on you. And a lot of people we get that come by trigger with the anti-walk pins the pins are actually walking because this hammer spring is installed backwards. So just something to be mindful of. The hammer spring is always fun to install because obviously you're going to have to put it in under spring tension. Okay, what I like to do is try to get low on the hammer when you put it in there, because that seems to make it easier controlling it from the top. It doesn't give you as much leverage. So you need to seat those springs right on the trigger pin there. Okay, and then I'm going to use my thumb to just kind of drive it down, and then make sure those springs stay inside of the jig here. Okay, reposition here. Okay, now having a punch is handy, okay, because you're going to be able to get a placeholder in there. All right, so I'm going to use this, kind of work it in here. Okay, that gives me just a bit of a starting point there, and I can kind of adjust and articulate a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is, you see here, because it's under spring tension, it's going to be misaligned. You just need to articulate so that you see the tip of that pin coming through, and then once that happens, you'll be able to drive it in and see. Okay, so now we've We've got that in there. We'll continue driving this through. Okay, so now next thing we're going to do is we're going to install, we're going to follow it through just like we did with the trigger. We're going to follow the hammer pin through. We're going to follow this through here. We lost our articulation here, so we'll have to do it the old school way. All right, get that in there. Okay, and again, I'm going to pick this up because I don't want it driving through into my bench there, and that's it. The trigger is now installed. I guess that's seated in there a little bit, and it feels good. First impressions is it feels good. Safety functions properly. One of the things that I did want to point out is the Sear design. Okay, now you'll notice that when the Sear is engaged, the hammer is locked back, it looks like the Sear engagement surface is overlapping. See that? And now if you flip it over, you'll see that is actually engaged on this portion. So by splitting it up, what they do is they reduce the surface area. They also create this ledge. Now this is part of what makes Hiperfire triggers proprietary. I believe this is a portion of, this is one of the things they have a patent on. And the other cool thing about that, so by not having the entire width engaged, that reduces the surface area, reduces the amount of friction, creates a smoother pull. It also gives them a ledge. So when they manufacture these, rather than having to individually tune each trigger to determine how much of the engagement surface is actually engaged, they can create this ledge at a specific height and then know from unit to unit that they're getting a consistent amount of surface area contact on the Sear, which is good for quality control. It also reduces some of the the risk of some of the inconsistencies from trigger to trigger for other standard mil-spec triggers. Okay, so next part we'll go over the trigger pull. We'll talk about the trigger pull characteristics. We'll compare it to a few other triggers and do measure the pull weight with a gauge. Okay, so we've got the trigger installed in our jig here. Now it's worth mentioning, I'm going to point out that we've got 3 different models of the EDT that you can get. The one I installed here is the Designated Marksman, and the reason is I like the trigger design. Trigger design on this one is got a flat spot down here at the bottom. Now that's useful for being able to index your finger, know where your finger needs to go if you're not looking for the lightest pull weight. Okay, because obviously as you move your finger down, you get more leverage, and that's going to effectively reduce the pull weight. And we'll see that as I do some of the testing with the triggers. Now, the other aspect of this is the hammer. Okay, so between the different models, some of them have a different trigger design and some of them have a different hammer design. This is the Designated Marksman. Once you get to the Heavy Gunner model, you'll notice that it's got the same hammer design, but it's got a curved trigger. Okay, now the curved trigger is much like what they use on their Hypertouch Genesis model, and I believe the Elite and a couple others. It's a nice trigger design. It's very comfortable, but it is more traditional. And then the Sharpshooter has the same trigger design. It's curved, but it's got what I would consider to be like kind of like a low mass hammer, and so that's basically the difference between the EDT, the 3 different models in the EDT line. Observations about this, I can tell you that the trigger pull is there is take up, but it's really smooth. It's not gritty or anything like that. There's not a lot of take up. I would say it's an acceptable amount, especially for a mil-spec style trigger. Better than most. Probably one of the best that I've felt, on par if not better than ALG's offering. They have their QMS, the quality mil-spec trigger. They have their ACT Advanced Combat Trigger. They also provide different, like 2 different springs. You get the standard springs and then what they call their purple power springs, which is a reduced trigger pull weight, much like these do. I will say though that I do prefer the reset on this. It is a nice tactile reset. And the other thing that I've noticed is if you're riding the reset, the trigger pull off of the reset is very similar to when you're not riding the reset. So that I've noticed is different. Now on a typical mil-spec trigger, what I tend to find, and I've got one right here, is that when you're pulling off of just a, from a standard position, there's take up, it's a little bit gritty, and then you get your hammer drop. When you're pulling off of the reset, you're actually getting, it's hard to see here, but you're getting less of the Sear engagement surface engaged there. So it's actually a better pull off of the reset. But what is nice about the EDT is that it is consistent both ways. The reset's good, the trigger pull's very smooth, it does not feel heavy. We're gonna test the trigger pull weight now. I've got a Wheeler digital testing gauge. Now, having used this a little bit now, I've had this for a little while, it does give some inconsistent readings. I've found that when you average them out, they tend to be accurate. They do go through a quality check, so this comes with a card that has like someone signed off that the pull weights are accurate on it. And then the other thing is too, depending on how fast you pull, a lot of times that'll affect the readings. So I'll take a few, we'll average them out, and we'll go from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this EDT trigger and I'm going to measure a pull weight off of it from the curved portion. And then each one I'll store will get kind of an average. That's 3 pounds, 12 ounces. Okay, we'll store that one in there. Again, off of the curved portion of the trigger, that's 3 pounds, 5 ounces. 3 pounds, 10 ounces. Okay, we're starting to see a bit of an average here. That's right at 4 pounds. And that's a 3 pounds, 12 ounces. Okay, so I think that's enough. We had a high pull weight of 4 pounds. We had a low pull weight of 3 pounds, 4.7 ounces. So I would say from the curve, we're getting an average pull weight of, right around 3 pounds, 10 ounces, 3 pounds, 12 ounces-ish, which is quite a light trigger, really. It's lighter than their advertised 4.5 pound pull weight for the green spring. And that variation could be partially due to the pull gauge, and it could also be just that it's a bit of a lighter pull on this particular group that I have here, and I'm not complaining about that. I think that's a good weight. Now we'll take a few readings from the flat portion of the trigger, which will effectively reduce the pull weight, and we'll see that here. So we'll take a pull here, 2 pounds, 1 ounce. 2 pounds, 2 ounces. 1 pound, 9 ounce. I'm pulling towards the bottom of this, so we're getting quite a bit of leverage on it. Now, yeah, 1 pound, 10 ounces. Okay, so I would say we're getting an under 2 pound pull down here on the flat spot of the trigger. And now the other thing I've noticed here is that the trigger is effectively longer also than a traditional mil-spec trigger. It extends down just a bit more, which is going to add to the additional leverage you're getting on that trigger pull. Really like this trigger design. So overall, very, very impressed with the EDT trigger. You can get as low as a 2 pound pull. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion that my gauge here might be under measuring. So, but even if that's the case and you've got more along the lines of a 4 pound pull in the curve and a 2 or even 2.5 pound pull and on the flat portion, that's still a phenomenally good pull weight. Now the question will be then, okay, since this has a standard type of hammer spring, it doesn't have the dual cam over toggle engine, I think they call it, for right here, which increases the power of the hammer strike. So you might be concerned about light strikes for something that's pulling pretty light in a standard mil-spec type setup. But I know on their website in the marketing materials, it says specifically that with these, you know, the way they've designed it, you're going to get nice, powerful hammer strikes, a good amount of force every time, whether you're using the green spring or the heavier red spring. So without testing this in the field, Hiperfire has addressed that, and you know, they say you can be confident that, you know, it'll ignite even hard primers. This is the EDT line. Okay, Hiperfire is known for their Hyper Touch line. This is the Genesis. Okay, and this baby is the model that started it all. And you'll notice, and this is one of the cool things about this trigger, is you'll notice as I pull, there is take up. Okay, I'm gonna go a little slower here so you can see it. Okay, now it is a very, very smooth take up. And one of the things that's kind of cool about this trigger is there is a good amount of take up, and there is, it essentially allows, it surprises you with the hammer strike. It's an interesting thing to say, but you know, for anyone who has a tendency to pull the trigger or anticipate recoil, or is really working on their trigger discipline, this can kind of force you to not anticipate that and pull your shots. It gives you a good method for practicing that continual pull all the way to the back. Is essentially a follow through on your trigger pull. So, which is is an important aspect of your trigger discipline. So this is the Genesis. Now, when you get into their other models, more recent models that they've come out with, the Elite, one thing I will add about the Genesis is while there is quite a bit of take up on that initial pull, off of the reset, lightning quick. Not much pull weight off of the reset. So for rapid fire situations after that initial pull, I think that you get quite you get a nice mix there. And then of course we've got the Elite model. Elite is going to have kind of a medium amount of take up, medium reset ride, and that this is kind of their, I guess I would call it kind of an all-arounder. Their most popular model is the Competition. Okay, the Competition it comes with this finger placement pad, and so it's adjustable. You can see that the trigger itself is notched, so you can adjust where you set this trigger pad, so you get a consistent placement on your finger every time, even when you're moving quickly. And this particular trigger has a imperceptible, if not almost no take up at all. Very, very clean break. It's a really light pull. So, and then same thing off the reset. Very tactile, no creep, basically. I mean, it's a very, very smooth trigger, and the dual cam toggle over engine, I always get, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but that is ensuring that you're getting nice, forceful hammer strikes on every time. So this is a really, really nice, these are all really, obviously, very nice triggers. And then the last one I have here is the Eclipse. Eclipse is a lot like the Competition, except for the trigger and hammer have a nickel boron finish. Wrapping everything up, I mean, I think that Hiperfire makes a lot of good triggers. They've developed a series of patents for their Hyper Touch line that they have employed on the EDT. I really like this EDT. I mean, for under $100, you're getting a very, very high quality trigger. And I personally really like this Designated Marksman model with the longer trigger and the flat spot on the bottom. That's about it. I think I'll wrap it up here. Obviously, I've got a lot of triggers that we can compare, and if there's interest, I'll do another comparison. I've got a Velocity here, I've got a regular mil spec, and I've got obviously the whole line of the Hiperfire triggers. I've got Geisleys out there and stuff that I can put in the jig. So if there's interest, we'll definitely do a more comprehensive comparison of different triggers. This was primarily just about the EDT line. I will probably put this exact trigger in a personal build and run it, and if there's any worthwhile information, I will definitely share that. So if I missed anything, you know, you can ask questions in the comments, yeah, so thanks for watching, and have a good day.